After 25 years of loyalty, Ruth Pearson is cast aside by the very firm she helped build. But when clients revolt, secrets surface, and a rival firm comes knocking, Ruth must decide, will she walk away quietly or orchestrate the most elegant corporate reckoning Boston has ever seen? A story of betrayal, power, and the quiet strength of one woman who turned exile into empire and left behind a legacy no one saw coming. The words floated in the air like an oil slick, slow, ugly, and impossible to ignore. We've decided to restructure the client relations department, Ruth. Today will be your last day. In the sleek glass-walled conference room of Franklin and Associates, those words crashed through Ruth Pearson's world like a boulder through stained glass. Across the polished mahogany table sat Dominic Hayes, the firm's new managing partner. His charcoal suit was perfect, his tie symmetrical, his expression carefully curated to project empathy. But there was nothing warm in his eyes. They were cold, transactional. Ruth's hands remained folded, calm. Her voice was steady, masking the storm building behind her ribs. After 25 years? It's not personal, Dominic replied, sliding a manila folder toward her. HR has prepared a severance package. 2 months' salary, benefits through the end of the quarter. Janice from HR is here to walk you through everything. Janice, seated to Dominic's right, nodded without making eye contact. It's a necessary realignment, she added weakly. Several departments are affected. This isn't a reflection on your performance, wasn't it though? Ruth was 58, the oldest member of the client relations team. Her salary, built over a quarter century of unwavering loyalty and excellence, was undoubtedly higher than the younger, shinier hires with MBAs and no memory of Franklin's scrappy origins. She had joined in 1998, when the firm had only 17 clients and operated out of half a floor in an aging office building. Near Boston Common, she had sat across from Arthur Franklin himself, the founder, during her interview. He had told her, numbers are the language of business, Ruth, but relationships? They're the heart. Anyone can crunch numbers. Not everyone can build trust. And she had lived by that philosophy. Now, she was being discarded like a used toner cartridge. Does Arthur know about this? She asked. Dominic's jaw tightened. All partners were consulted, an obvious dodge. Arthur had been in London for 3 weeks, finalizing the firm's European expansion. He would never have allowed this. He couldn't have. Dominic leaned back in his chair. Best of luck in your future endeavors. The meeting was over. Security was waiting by the time she reached her office. A protocol she had written over a decade ago now wielded against her. She packed slowly, deliberately. Framed photos with longtime clients. The crystal paperweight Arthur had given her on her 20th anniversary. Handwritten thank you notes. A paper napkin with her doodled F&A redesign from 2003. A dozen memories in physical form. Her phone buzzed. Catherine Winters Healthcare heard troubling rumors. Call me ASAP. Ruth looked across the office floor. Dominic was already on the phone, probably spinning the story as a strategic shift. But what he didn't know, what none of them grasped, was that her relationships weren't transactional. They were deep. They were personal. They were irreplaceable. Back in her apartment 3 days later, Ruth sat in silence, laptop open to job boards, messages unread, LinkedIn buzzing with new views. There was something darkly comical about it. Fired one day, fascinating the next. The landline rang. She almost let it go to voicemail. Ruth. It's Arthur. His voice was tight, British accented, usually composed, but today it held strain. I just landed. I just heard. This wasn't approved by me. Relief, rage, disbelief all tangled in her throat. Well, it happened. Dominic said the partners I was sidelined deliberately, he interrupted. They waited until I was in Europe, then forced it through under emergency protocol. Ruth, I'm so sorry. 25 years. You deserved so much better. Ruth closed her eyes. He called me legacy fat. Silence. You understand what that means, don't you? She asked. Yes. Arthur said quietly. Then you also understand why I can't come back. I want to make this right. Bring You back? We'll call it a misunderstanding. It's not that simple, Arthur. Your leadership team has made it abundantly clear what they think I'm worth. He was silent again. Who's managing my clients now? Melissa Bennett. Ruth let out a bitter laugh. Catherine Winters will eat her alive. That night, her phone erupted. Not just Catherine. Douglas from Archer. Belinda from Summit. Westridge Manufacturing's entire C-suite. None had heard from her directly, but the news was out. The next morning, a courier arrived with a heavy envelope. Inside, a formal letter from Catherine Goldstein, Boston's most respected headhunter. A handwritten note read, "Heard what happened. Several firms are interested. Let's talk." She hadn't needed to reach out. Her reputation was louder than any press release. Catherine Winters called at 7:38 a.m. "Tell me you're not gone." "I'm afraid I am." Melissa emailed me. Introduced herself. The same woman who once tried to explain my own company's workflow to me. "I haven't decided what's next." Well, decide fast. My contract is up for renewal in 60 days, and I don't trust them without you. By the end of the day, 11 clients had called. No outreach, no solicitation, just pure, unfiltered trust. Dinner that night with Catherine Goldstein was illuminating. Offers from 3 firms. 2 created roles just for her. The salary offers made her breath catch. "They're not paying for your title," Catherine said. "They're paying for your name in their contact list." The irony wasn't lost on her. Too expensive for Franklin, but twice as valuable to everyone else. The next morning, Arthur called again. "I need to see you." They met for lunch at the Harvest. Arthur looked drained. "I'm trying to fix this," he began. "Dominic's blocking me. Clients are furious. Catherine's demanding a meeting. Douglas is reviewing contracts. 3 smaller clients have already walked." He slid a proposal across the table. "Chief Client Officer. Reports directly to me. Full autonomy. Partner-level compensation." It was everything she'd wanted, but she saw the truth in Arthur's eyes. It wasn't about fixing the firm. It was about saving his seat. "Dominic's pushing for your retirement." Arthur blinked. "You're trying to save yourself, not me." He looked away. "I'm meeting other firms. You understand. Business decisions aren't personal." The next few days were a whirlwind. She met with Blackwell Consulting. Their values reminded her of the old FANA. They offered equity, real partnership. Meanwhile, FANA was bleeding. Catherine Winters stormed out of a meeting. Archer Pharmaceuticals canceled their review. Westridge was reviewing competitor proposals. Then came the call. "Miss Pearson, Jeffrey Hammond, Boston Business Journal. We're doing a story on FANA's client exodus. Multiple sources mention you. Any comment?" She declined to speak on record. "What about the letter? Signed by 26 clients? Demanding that Arthur replace Dominic Hayes?" Her mouth went dry. "I do not know any letter." Thomas texted her. "Emergency meeting tomorrow." Dominic looks pale. Something big is going down. An hour later, Arthur called. "Did you orchestrate this?" "I did nothing. Clients made their own choices. 70% of our base is threatening to leave. The board is panicking. What do you want from me?" "Come back. Full equity partner. Lead a new division. Help me stabilize the firm." She looked at the Blackwell offer. "Safer, better, cleaner. I'll give you my answer in the morning." She didn't sleep till dawn. She called Catherine Goldstein. "I'm going with Blackwell. And your condition?" "I want them to acquire Franklin and Associates." Catherine laughed. Ruthless Ruth. "I love it." At precisely 8:45 a.m., Ruth Pearson stepped through the revolving doors of Franklin and Associates, not as a dismissed employee, but as the woman who now held the keys to its future. The receptionist blinked in stunned recognition. "Miss Pearson, are you here for the meeting?" "I am. Arthur is expecting me." She walked past familiar halls that once hummed with ambition and camaraderie, now heavy with uncertainty. Every step was a reclaiming of ground once lost. The conference room was packed. Partners who rarely appeared in person had flown in. Junior associates and department heads lined the walls. At the front stood Arthur Franklin, flanked by visibly tense board members. Dominic Hayes was notably absent. As Ruth entered, a hush fell. Heads turned. Arthur nodded to her with unspoken relief. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "We're facing significant disruption following recent leadership decisions. I'm pleased to announce that Ruth Pearson has agreed to return to Franklin and Associates as a full equity partner, leading our newly formed client relations division." Gasps, murmurs, eyes wide with shock and curiosity. Arthur raised a hand. "Additionally, the board has unanimously voted to remove Dominic Hayes as managing partner effective immediately. His approach has been deemed inconsistent with our firm's founding values." More murmurs, some surprised, some, if Ruth read correctly, were satisfied. Arthur gestured to her. "Ruth, would you like to say a few words?" She stepped forward, calm and composed. "Thank you, Arthur. I appreciate the offer to return as a partner," she said, then paused. "However, I must clarify something." The room stiffened. "I'm not coming back to Franklin and Associates." Gasps filled the room. Even Arthur's face faltered. "I'm pleased to announce that I've accepted a partnership at Blackwell Consulting, which has just finalized an acquisition deal to purchase a controlling interest in Franklin and Associates." The room erupted. "I understand this comes as a surprise," she continued, composed. "But Blackwell believes in preserving the legacy of what made Franklin and Associates great: its people, its values, and its relationships. There are no immediate plans for mass layoffs or restructuring, unless inefficiencies demand it." Arthur stepped forward, pale. "Ruth, what have you done?" "I didn't do anything, Arthur. I recognized my value, something your leadership team failed to do." She walked out, leaving stunned silence in her wake. That night, the Boston Business Journal broke the story. Consulting shakeup. Blackwell acquires Franklin and Associates after client exodus. Her name appeared once, buried deep in the article. Ruth Pearson, former senior director of client relations, has accepted a partnership at Blackwell and will oversee the integration of Franklin's client portfolio. But in boardrooms and client dinners across Boston, she was the headline. Over the next week, Ruth took command of the transition from Blackwell's Tower office. She reviewed org charts, portfolios, and client histories. And the visitors began to arrive: former colleagues, department heads, partners who had once ignored her emails. Each came with questions, praise, and soft apologies disguised as compliments. Dominic's name was rarely spoken. He had vanished, quietly dismissed. Rumor had it he'd landed at a boutique consulting firm in Chicago. No one missed him. A week after the acquisition, Arthur requested a meeting. He looked 10 years older. "You orchestrated this," he said. "No," Ruth replied. "You did, when you let Dominic in. When you stepped back instead of standing up. I built this firm. And then you forgot what built it," she replied. She slid a paper across the table. "Blackwell is offering you a 3-year advisory contract. No management responsibilities. A generous exit. Take it or walk." Arthur stared, defeated. 6 months later, Blackwell Franklin Consulting occupied 2 prime floors downtown. The integration had been smoother than anyone expected. Ruth had insisted on retaining the people who mattered. Clients returned. Revenues surged. Staff morale climbed. Dominic faded into irrelevance. Arthur stayed in his advisory role. Their interactions remained professional, cordial, and distant. In her corner office, Ruth reviewed the latest client satisfaction numbers. 95% retention, 23% growth, industry awards lining the glass walls. Her assistant knocked. "Miss Winters is here for your lunch." Ruth stood. Catherine Winters strode in, elegant, formidable. "Congratulations," Catherine said. "The industry still can't stop talking about it." Elegant, devastating, just the right kind of vengeance. Ruth smiled. "Not vengeance. A correction." Catherine laughed. "Call it what you want. You reminded every firm in the city what matters: relationships, not metrics, not algorithms." As they walked toward the elevator, Ruth glanced out the window. The city pulsed below, alive, restless, watching. She hadn't sought revenge, but justice, like loyalty, had a way of coming back when least expected, and sometimes with interest. It began quietly. At first, just a series of irregularities. In a routine compliance report, a few invoices from Dominic's tenure that didn't match internal logs. Ruth noticed it while reviewing legacy systems during the Franklin integration. A former controller had flagged the inconsistencies before her departure, but no one had followed up. Ruth flagged it to Blackwell's internal audit team. What started as a footnote became a probe. What the auditors uncovered was troubling. Off-the-books consulting contracts, expense accounts tied to vendors that didn't exist, and quarterly projections that had been inflated through manipulated client reports. Dominic hadn't just been short-sighted, he'd been fraudulent. Ruth sat in the conference room reviewing the preliminary audit summary when Catherine Winters joined her, holding two lattes. You always did say Dominic was too slick, Catherine said, setting one latte down. This confirms it. They're calling it corporate fraud, Ruth replied, her voice low but steady. Millions unaccounted for. The financial stress we attributed to the expansion strategy, it was a cover. Catherine leaned back, whistling. Do the partners know? Not yet. Legal and compliance want to handle it quietly, but word won't stay contained for long. 2 days later, the board called an emergency meeting. Arthur sat silent as the forensic auditors presented their findings. Ruth watched him closely. He looked less shocked than ashamed. Perhaps he'd seen glimpses and turned away. When they adjourned, he approached Ruth. I failed you again, he said simply. You failed the firm. Not just me. He nodded, accepting the truth. What happens now? Blackwell will take over the investigation and turn over findings to the authorities. There's no other path. That night, the Boston Globe ran a headline. Franklin's fall. Former managing partner under investigation for corporate fraud. Ruth's name again appeared deep in the article, this time as the executive who brought the issues to light. But her phone didn't stop buzzing. Partners, industry analysts, journalists, they all wanted a quote, a comment, a reaction. She gave none. A week later, she sat across from Arthur again, this time in the same office where she'd been fired 10 months ago. They'll indict him, he said hollowly. They should. He studied her. And me? You ignored the cracks, Ruth replied. You turned a visionary firm into a house of cards by stepping away from your values. That's your reckoning. Arthur looked down. Do you think I could have stopped him? You could have empowered someone who would have. The reckoning rippled outward. 3 more partners resigned. Blackwell moved to fully rebrand the firm within the year. Franklin and Associates became Blackwell Pearson Group, a name chosen not by Ruth, but by the board to signal the new era. Ruth resisted the title change at first. She preferred quiet influence to overt authority. But when clients began referring to the firm by her name, the decision became inevitable. Her office changed again. A top-floor corner suite, with sweeping views of the Charles River and the city skyline. But the power didn't change her. Every week, she met with client managers. She still remembered birthdays and boardroom details. The secret, she often told new hires, wasn't in the systems, it was in the empathy. The reckoning wasn't just about Dominic. It was about a culture that forgot its foundation. And Ruth, she never forgot. She carried the fall, the rise, and the reckoning like milestones etched in stone. But one chapter remained. 1 year later, the plaque on the lobby wall read, Blackwell Pearson Group. Underneath, in elegant bronze, founded on trust, rebuilt on integrity. Ruth stood before it one evening, alone, the soft lighting reflecting off the brushed metal. The journey had come full circle, from the humiliation of that final meeting with Dominic to the quiet triumph of saving the very soul of a firm she helped build. But tonight wasn't about the past. It was about what came next. Miss Pearson? Her assistant poked in. Everyone's ready upstairs. She nodded, smoothing her jacket. Let's begin. The glass-walled boardroom buzzed with energy. Not with tension, as it once had, but ambition. It was the first leadership roundtable of the newly restructured firm. Department heads from both legacy Blackwell and former Franklin divisions filled the room, joined by young associates Ruth had personally mentored. She took her seat at the head of the table, by title CEO, though she rarely used it. "I want to begin," Ruth said, "by thanking each of you for trusting this vision, for choosing a firm culture that values people over politics, relationships over revenue goals." A round of applause broke out, genuine and grateful, but the work was never done. Ruth turned to the whiteboard behind her. "Our clients are evolving. Industries are shifting. We won't survive by reacting. We lead by anticipating. That's why I'm launching the Legacy Project." Heads tilted, pens paused. "It's more than mentorship or succession planning. It's about institutional memory, about weaving values into our strategies so that no matter who leads after us, this firm never forgets what it stands for." She clicked her remote. A slide appeared. The Legacy Framework.it featured 4 pillars: empathy, ethics, engagement, evolution. Each team will develop proposals to embed these principles into daily client service, not as buzzwords, but as action. There were murmurs of approval, even some nods from the more traditional partners who had once viewed Ruth with cautious admiration. Outside the boardroom, the press took notice. The Harvard Business Review published a feature titled "Ruth Pearson and the Quiet Revolution of Client Capital." Another article in The Atlantic called her the architect of emotional intelligence in corporate consulting. Still, Ruth kept a low profile. She turned down awards, declined keynotes. She focused on mentorship, often meeting junior staff for coffee, listening more than she spoke. One evening, she received a letter in her office. "Hendriton, you probably don't remember me. I was a temp admin during the transition. You sat beside me once during lunch and asked what I wanted to become. No one ever asked me that. You told me to build with purpose, even if no one is watching. I just accepted a scholarship to MIT's MBA program. Thank you." Ruth smiled, folded the letter, and placed it in a drawer filled with similar notes, not for pride, but to remind herself why the struggle had been worth it. At home, her world was quieter. Her apartment remained the same, warm, lined with books, and old client thank you notes framed on the walls. She still met Catherine Winters for dinner every month, still sent birthday cards to Arthur, who had quietly retired to Vermont. Dominic Hayes, now a ghost in the industry, occasionally surfaced in obscure finance blogs or court documents, but he no longer occupied Ruth's mind. He'd been a catalyst, not a legacy. Years later, when Ruth finally stepped down, the firm didn't crumble. It flourished. She passed the reins to 2 co-leaders, one from Blackwell, one from Franklin's original team. Balanced, grounded, chosen for character more than charisma. At her farewell dinner, held in the rooftop ballroom overlooking the Charles, speeches flowed like champagne. Clients flew in from 5 countries. Team members wept. A video montage was played of the firm's growth, but Ruth's speech was brief. "I leave this firm in strong hands, not because of what we've built, but because of how we've built it. Relationships are not assets, they are inheritances. Guard them well." The room stood as one. Not applause. A standing ovation. Silent, respectful, lasting. And as she walked out that night into the Boston air, the skyline blazing, Ruth Pearson felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. She had fallen. She had risen. She had reckoned. And now, she had left a legacy.